Hello everyone. Today we're lucky enough to be joined by Dr. Anthony Chaffee, who is a surgeon and also a nutritional researcher. He's 100% carnivore and has a different take on nutrition than what you'll find in the mainstream. Dr. Chaffee is also an ex-professional athlete, having played for America in rugby union, and you've also done a bit of MMA, I believe.
Yeah, prior to that, since I was about 14. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so the topic for today is sugar. And I want to start off by asking, what don't we know about sugar, Dr. Chaffee? What don't we understand?
Well, we first have to sort of distinguish between what kind of sugars are we talking about. Okay. So when we say sugar, generally we mean table sugar, but obviously there are a lot of different carbohydrates that are called simple sugars. The sugar that you want to watch out for is fructose specifically. So that is, obviously it comes in fruits and so forth, but it's half of sucrose. Sucrose is a disaccharide of glucose and fructose. Right. And then you have high fructose corn syrup, and that's been painted as this sort of evil monster, and it is, but it's almost identical to sucrose because it has very similar levels. It's almost 50% fructose, glucose, but it's just a mixture of the two as opposed to being a bound form. And then honey actually has more fructose than both of those. Yeah. So the problem with fructose is how it's metabolized in your body. It's actually non-essential. It's not something that you need in your body. There are no biochemical processes in your body that require fructose that can't be done by something else. So you don't need it at all. A major problem is that it goes directly to your liver and then gets broken down from there into fatty droplets and other sorts of byproducts. The problem there is that it actually gets broken down to the same byproducts as ethanol, alcohol, right? So you get the same diseases and damage to your body from eating fructose as you do from drinking alcohol.
So you can get fatty liver disease from being an alcoholic and from eating too much sugar.
Exactly. Yeah. So it actually used to be very well known that only alcoholics got fatty liver disease, and then in the 1990s when we started increasing a lot of our sugar consumption, putting sugar in everything because we got rid of the fat in different foods and everything tasted horrible. And so we put sugar in everything, and then all of a sudden, 10-year-olds were getting fatty liver disease, and they were also getting adult onset diabetes. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes because really only found it in adults, and generally they were alcoholics, and that's because the alcohol really causes that. And then all of a sudden, 10-year-olds are getting this, and they're saying, well, wow, what's going on here? How can a 10-year-old get adult onset diabetes? They're not an adult, and he's getting fatty liver disease, but only alcoholics get fatty liver disease. How can someone who's never drank alcohol get this? So instead of actually looking into this and actually thinking for literally 1 second, they just said, you know what, we'll just rename it. And so now it's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Right, but it's the same
type 2 diabetes. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, wow. You mentioned something earlier about people adding, or companies adding sugar to food because they removed the fat, meaning it tasted terrible.
Yeah. Fat, you talk to any chef, they'll tell you fat is flavor.
Yeah, butter.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when we're told that fat's bad for you, it's not. It's actually really, really good for you. Animal fat is. Vegetable oils and so forth are actually quite toxic for a number of reasons. But when you take that out, it tastes very, very bland and horrible. Like even steak, I love steak, but like a lean steak, you can only have so much of it before it's just sort of like, whereas like a fatty steak is obviously
you just keep going. Yeah,
totally.
Exactly. So you mentioned before, fructose is one of the worst forms of sugar. So if I'm eating fruit, I feel like there's a limit to how much whole fruit I can eat. I'm not going to eat more than 2 apples.
Yeah.
So is it dangerous or is it detrimental for people to be eating whole fruit?
So obviously, it's better, because it's dose dependent, but that's like saying, I'm only doing 2 lines of Coke instead of a whole bag, So, but yeah, you're right. 2 apples is very different than 2 glasses of apple juice.
Yes, exactly.
Like a glass of apple juice, have some like 10 apples, worth of juice go into that. It's going to be a lot more sugar. It's also been shown that the fiber in fruit and so forth, when you eat that, delays the absorption of fruit. It delays absorption of everything because you can't. It's literally sawdust. That's what cellulose is. That's what fiber is. And they add sawdust into processed foods to up the fiber content. There's tons of foods that can eat that. And so what does that do? It blocks the enzymes and so forth from getting at these the different foods in your gut, and it blocks them from actually hitting the villi and things like that in your small intestine and getting absorbed. So it delays that, stops that absorption, then it gets into your colon and bacteria eat it and so forth, and you eliminate it. So it does reduce some of the fructose in there, but At the same time, you are getting that stuff in, so it is very important to be aware of that. And you're also getting other things that you don't want as well. Fiber in and of itself actually causes damage to your gut lining, causes microabrasion, causes increased mucus secretion, inflammatory reaction, and so forth. And so people, especially with autoimmune disorders, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, they have a real hard time with fiber and so forth.
Absolutely. So where do you think the story of fiber being good for us has come from? How do you think
I remember this when I was a kid. So the entire argument on why we should eat fiber and vegetables in general is everything was about the fat craze in the 1980s. It was like, fat busters and all these sorts of things. It's like, diet diets, fat, you are what you eat. If you eat fat, you get fat. That was the whole argument. It's completely wrong. I eat a lot of fat. I get about 70-80% of my calories from fat. I generally maintain below 10% body fat, even when I'm not working out.
And where do you get the fat from?
From steak, generally, from beef and things like that. Butter, like I melt butter into my ribeye steaks. So in the 1980s, or 1977 to 1980, the USDA declared unequivocally that cholesterol causes heart disease, saturated fat increases cholesterol, stop eating both of these things. That's completely wrong. It's going to be completely debunked. But that changed how everyone viewed everything. So the obesity rate in England after World War II was 6%. In 1983, when they adopted these same dietary models, it was still 6%. Now it's like over 24%. Same thing in America, it was 6% and 8%, and then it tripled in a very short period of time. So everyone started getting fat, everyone started getting sick, and they got even more crazed about not eating fat. Then they said you should eat vegetables because they don't have nutrition, because they don't have calories, and because they're bulky and they have fiber, which you cannot absorb. So it was never actually argued at that time that this is nutritionally beneficial. They said, hey, this isn't nutritionally beneficial, so therefore you'll feel full, so you can eat as much of it as you want, and you'll get full, and you won't get any fat. There was a celery diet where it said you can just, it takes more calories to process the celery that you eat than you get from this celery. So just eat all the celery you want. It's like, well, that's how much celery I want, And they don't talk about all the other things in there as well, which are very harmful, toxic components that are in plants and vegetables and so forth that are that plant's way of defending itself against being eaten that people just aren't thinking about. But that was the entire argument, was that you can't break it down, you can't get nutrition from it. But
it makes you feel full.
But it makes it feel full, and you get the stress receptors, and your body produces a bit of leptin, your brain goes, oh, I'm full, and so forth. And it's nonsense. People were getting fatter, they're getting sicker, they're getting unwell. This is when a lot of the eating disorders really took off. Bulimia, anorexia, and so forth. People are starved for nutrients. You need the fat, you need the meat, you need those things. But fat makes you fat. Meat has a lot of fat. Oh my goodness, stay away from it. And they're craving it, and everything in their body's like, you need to eat this, and so they'll binge and purge. They'll eat it, and then they'll go, oh my god, I can't believe I did that, and they'll vomit it out. Or you get anorexics, which and people do have these sort of problems for a number of different issues. This is just one of them that's theorized, is that they aren't going to eat the everything that their body's craving them to have, because that's going to make them fat. And they have a very strong aversion to all the vegetables and things like that, because they don't make them feel good because of different poisons and so forth. They just don't feel good, they don't like it, they don't taste good, and so they just don't eat at all. And you get into a very pathological relationship with your food, as opposed to being, you eat food to give your body nutrition. Now you're eating for a lot of other different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to the effect that sugar has on your body, so we talked about fatty liver disease. How else is sugar affecting our bodies?
Yeah, so Professor Robert Lustig, who's a professor emeritus at University of California, San Francisco Medical School, in pediatric neuroendocrinology. So he deals with kids with bad diabetes and things like that. He, along with the biochemistry program at UCSF, I think last time I checked, it was like the number 6 medical research institution in America, so it's a very, very top institution. They show biochemically, how fructose is broken down in your body by your liver and so forth. And it shows like all these different sorts of things. And it also showed that it causes peripheral insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes. It's also involved in atherosclerosis and so forth, so heart disease. We've actually had studies showing, or suggesting anyway, that sugar caused heart disease back in the 40s and 50s. And it was actually then that the sugar companies got wind of this, and they said, like, okay, we need to cover this up.
Fat's bad, not sugar.
That's it. And so they actually, the Journal of American Medical Association actually published this in 2015, actual internal memos from the sugar companies back then, detailing how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol is causing heart disease when it was really sugar. And then one of those professors was named head of the USDA in 1965, and then all of a sudden the USDA just declares that this is happening, and it's appealing to authority. Teacher says so, says that cholesterol is bad, therefore cholesterol is bad. And it completely, ruined the reputations of everyone who was saying, no, it's really sugar. And really actually destroyed their careers and their livelihoods and so forth. And they were dead right the whole time. So Lustig showed that this does the same damage to your body as alcohol. After it's broken down, obviously it doesn't make you drunk and have the same central nervous effects, but after it's broken down, it has the same damage to your body, and kids as well. Give them, people don't realize how much sugar is around. You'd never give a kid, whiskey, I hope, and but you'd probably give them, orange juice or other juices, right? Yeah. Well, one 12-ounce glass of orange juice has as many grams of fructose as 3 shots of 40% whiskey have alcohol, and does the same damage to their little body. So he was showing all sorts of things, and he's written dozens of papers on the subject. He's written books on the subject and so forth, done tons and tons of talks as well that are readily available on YouTube. They're very interesting. He just talks about fructose and how damaging this is and how it causes sort of the same things as alcohol: fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, diabetes, even heart disease. It's implicated in cancer. It certainly feeds cancer, if not precipitating and causing cancer, and even has a strong correlation with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is now referred to in some circles as type 3 diabetes, and so there's these similar metabolic changes and effects that we're seeing in this disease process as with type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. And well, yeah, no kidding, they have the same cause, or at least they have one of the same causes.
That's interesting. I remember reading reports about elderly people who have Alzheimer's being put onto a ketogenic high-fat diet, and the Alzheimer's being repaired.
Yeah, well, there was quite large studies with that. With the high-fat ketogenic diet, they found was a better treatment model than every Alzheimer's drug that's ever been trialed.
Right. Okay. Less profitable, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, but that's the thing with doctors now is we're usually for thousands of years of medicine, you had a disease that came up, or an injury or something, and you had a treatment for that thing. Okay. And so now we're looking at this. Now we have these chronic diseases. This is a disease. We need to treat this disease. But the problem is, it's not a disease. These are toxicities. These are poisoning coming in. Sometimes we recognize something as poisoning. Lead poisoning. It's like the Romans, right? Back in the day, they had lead pipes, and they all had sort of low-grade lead poisoning for however long. And they just thought, well, this is just how you age, this is how you do, and this is normal. And it's like, well, no, actually, it's not normal. Something's happening, something's making us sick. They figured out it was the lead pipes. So we're living in that now. We don't realize we're being poisoned, but we're all being poisoned. So like vegetables, fruit, bread, sugar, these sorts of things, they're all our lead pipes. And you have to have some outsider looking in and going like, I can tell you that this is not normal.
That's a very interesting perspective. I saw something on your Instagram that I reposted yesterday, where you were talking about, I think it was Native Americans living to 120 years plus, 120 years. Yeah. Whereas now it's rare to find someone in good health over 80. And even over 70, it's rare.
Yeah, well, and think about the Native Australian population. They have generally quite poor health. In medicine here, we just say whatever their age is, just add 20 to it, because that's metabolically
compared to the general pop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you saw someone comes in at 35, you consider them like you would a 55-year-old, and then those sorts of considerations and so forth at that time. They're more at risk. That's from eating the wrong thing. We know as geneticists for decades now, I think at least 20 years, that chromosomally, genetically, the human animal should live 120 years.
Wow.
Right? And that's just if you just don't do anything special, like if you just don't get in your own way. You're not harming yourself, you're not smoking, you're not drinking, you're not eating bad food. You should live to 120 years, and we're all dying in our 60s and 70s. Native populations are dying quicker than that, but they didn't used to. And there was actually a study here in Australia that noticed that and said, well, this isn't what you guys don't normally eat a Western diet. You normally eat animals you find in the bush. Well, let's get you back on that diet, see what happens. It just reversed all their diseases, reversed their obesity, and gave them very, very big health benefits. In America, there have been books written about it, like all sorts of things back hundreds of years, showing how these people were just pure carnivores, and they lived great age, and people could be dismissive of that and say, well, they're probably just saying that. They're probably just saying that because they put great weight in longevity and so forth.
Or whatever.
Yeah. So, well, he just says that. Well, I mean, that's your assumption. Yeah. But there's all these different native populations that all basically say, oh, I was born the year that volcano erupted, and they're like, that was like 120 years ago. Yeah. Like, that can't be. And they just assume that they're lying. But but every single time, every single case, in every single country, in every single continent, they're completely different from each other. Well, yeah. I mean, who cares? I mean, and maybe one culture, puts great stock in that, and be like, oh yeah, well, that's Lazarus, he lived 1,000 years, and like, okay, all right.
The wisest man.
Yeah, exactly. But every single time in every single culture on every single continent, I don't think that would really hold water. And we do know now that genetically we are supposed to live that long if we live naturally. They're living naturally. Dr. J.H. Salisbury, eponymous for the Salisbury steak. He actually was a New York doctor in the 1800s who did a 30-year research project into the optimal nutrition for humans. Okay. He went with the Native Americans, saw they were only eating meat, only eating buffalo, and they were living these great ages, and there's actually quite a lot of documentation to support that and show that. And he was showing they were so healthy, they were just running around doing these things. They were 110, 115, and he was like, that's crazy.
Dr. Salisbury, did you say?
Yeah, Salisbury, J.H. Salisbury. Yeah, he wrote a book about all this stuff in the 1800s.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Yeah. So we've known about this for a long time. He was finding people that, this is long before sugar, really became a problem. And so it's just people eating plants and bread and all these sorts of things. And he found that people who were eating plants and bread and so the Western diet, they were getting diseases other people simply weren't. They were getting sicker easier, they were more susceptible to tuberculosis, they were getting rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, gout, all these sorts of things. He found they put them on a pure red meat and water diet, they would just go away. So he was curing rheumatoid arthritis
in the 1800s.
In the 100 years before any medications, just goes away. Happens today. There's quite a large population of people with autoimmune disorders, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, and so forth. They're just completely getting rid of their autoimmune diseases. The very famous one would be Kyla Peterson, Jordan Peterson's daughter. She had horrible rheumatoid arthritis, where she actually
had joint replacements.
Yeah, right? two of them when she was a teenager, and it's gone now.
Yeah.
She's off all her horrible medications. She's having kids now. I mean, she's doing great, and that's really good to see. So yeah, as far as the Native Americans are concerned, I remember hearing when I was a kid that when on a Western diet, Native Americans were 4 times as likely to get obesity, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and so forth. And I remember thinking at the time, well, doesn't that mean that the food is causing the disease? Because if they don't eat the food, they don't get the disease. And we eat the food and we get the disease just at a lower rate. And then it was just like, okay, well, what's a Western diet compared to a non-Western diet? What's their diet? What are they eating that we're not, and vice versa? Well, they didn't say it at the time, but it was a pure carnivore diet, generally red meat. Then buffalo, the Inuits and so forth would be eating seal and polar bear and whale and things like that, but exclusively meat. There's so many explorer studies or journals and books and things like that have been written in Australia and America that I've read, and they always have a chapter, something that they talk about, like the diet of the native people, and they marvel how they only eat meat, how they're crazy healthy. Up north, I remember reading one, this guy was just shocked that these people wouldn't eat any plants at all ever, or any bread ever, and they didn't want it. It was just like they'd offer them, but no, thank you. And they were talking about the Inuits specifically. Some of them, in the North Pole, there's just no plants ever.
That's right. Yeah.
But some of the
growing crops there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one's more southerly. They're saying like, okay, well, I understand. 9 months out of the year, everything's just packed with snow. But for 3 months out of the year, when the snow melts, and this is in his words, surely they could live off the bounty of the land, but they don't. They don't want to, and they really wondered at that. Well, that's why. Stuff's bad for you. It's not very good. You could, different native populations would know what to eat in times of starvation, but if they didn't need to, they didn't eat it. You know? And that was the thing. We used to call these things the diseases of the West because only like the Western peoples eating a Western diet would get them.
We experience them, yeah.
Yeah, and so then you go to these places like, oh, they don't get the disease of the West. Now we just call them getting older, and that's normal. And people don't realize how abnormal that is. The heart disease rate since 1980 tripled. The obesity rate has tripled. The stroke rate has tripled. The cancer rate has tripled. Type 2 diabetes has gone up by 5.8 times.
There's this sort of sense of, like, you compare yourself to the previous generation.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that we tend to compare ourselves to, say, our parents. And when you look at our parents, it's like, oh, well, I reckon I can live 5 years, longer than my dad. But now we have this modern medicine, and the actual quality of the life might not be as high.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to have this perspective that you've got, where you're looking at 1800s, 1700s, native populations who've been living a certain way for thousands of years. It's so easy to just look at here and now and not actually zoom out. Like the work of Weston A. Price is similar. He's a dentist in the 1930s, traveling around the world looking at these native populations who have incredible health, but their children who are getting exposed to the Western way of life. They've got crowded teeth. And just terrible health. Yeah,
well, they found I was reading a journal in dentistry, and they were talking about how crooked teeth and small jaw size is not genetic, that it's nutritional, and it's generally a nutritional deficiency. You need K2, K1, calcium, and vitamin D for proper jaw and teeth formation and straight teeth and so forth. And these things don't really exist too readily in plants. Certainly K2 doesn't. And so that's generally what we see is, someone has we may be deficient in everything, but generally almost, a lot of people are deficient in K2. And so they have these, crooked, crowded teeth. Their wisdom teeth aren't coming in like that. That's a very new thing. Actually, people are like, we're evolving. Like, not in 2 generations, dude. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
I've wondered about that. It's like, how come we all need to go to the dentist to get them taken out when, what would our ancestors have done?
Not that.
Yeah.
Well, they don't need it. Yeah. I mean, you look at cavemen skulls and so forth. Before I was just actually talking to someone about this the other day. Apparently, paleontologists can tell if a skull is before or after the agricultural revolution just by looking at their teeth and jaw size. And the quality of their teeth, if they're having cavities and so forth, because they just didn't happen before that. Think of animals in the wild. They don't have rotting teeth. They're just hanging out of their mouth. Well, what? They don't brush their teeth. They don't go to the dentist. How can that be? Well, they're eating their natural diet, and their body's able to accommodate that. You don't see animals in the wild with crooked teeth. Strange, creepy jaws. You see a lot of people do that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you give them the zoo. Sometimes they'll give them fruit. That'll rot their teeth. The only gorilla that eats bananas are on cartoons and the zoo. In the wild, they generally don't do that. That's not their staple diet, and their teeth work better for that.
Yeah, sure. All right, so we'll circle back to sugar. Avoid fructose. So I'm guessing fruit juice. Avoid like the plague. Honey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What other foods are people consuming that are plant and sugar that might be really damaging their health, but they don't realise it? Is there anything else you put on that list?
You mean apart from sugar?
Well, I suppose anything
that has sugar
anything
in
that's
it.
High in fructose. Obviously, soft drink. We know soft drink.
Yeah. Anything that you didn't make probably has sugar in it because they add it to everything. The sugar companies know full well that this stuff is addictive, and it is addictive. It gives a dopamine response to the addiction centers in your brain, just like cocaine, heroin, and meth. And there were MRI studies showing that fructose kills the same areas of your brain as meth to the same extent as meth. Okay, so that's quite appalling. It's a very addictive drug. I think it's the worst drug on earth, specifically because we don't realize that it's a drug at all. So it's in everything, and we get kids addicted to it. We go, but they like it. They probably like cigarettes and Coke too. Once they got addicted to it, it's very, very harmful. It is addictive like meth, kills the reward centers in your brain like meth, and damages your body like alcohol. How is this not an age-restricted chemical? There was I forget the guy's name, but he was a very well-known doctor in Amsterdam, And he's been saying for quite some time as well that sugar is the worst drug on earth. I absolutely agree with him. And this guy's from Amsterdam, like they know about drugs there, So.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there.
Cool.
Dr. Shafee, that was brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thoughts on sugar. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.